Hey everybody, welcome back. So in this section, we're going to talk about how do you scale the process of mining and prospecting your leads. So there are roughly three different ways that you can scale this process. The first is outsourcing or delegation. The second is bulk purchasing. And the third thing is automation. Now in this section, we're going to cover the first two, outsourcing and bulk purchasing. We're not going to cover automation, and there's two reasons for that. Now, with automation, what I'm talking about are things like import.io. So there's a lot of these tools out there where you can say, go to a web directory of companies and scrape all that information, and you do it programmatically, and it throws it into something that's useful for you. And the reason why we're not going to cover it is because, one, it's a really inexact process. It's only good at grabbing large amounts of information out there. So it's only good if you take it and go towards a high-level domain that has a lot of information and it just goes and tries to grab everything. It almost ends up being the case that you spend just as much time cleaning your list as if you had just gone and done it yourself. The other reason is that if it's worth automating something, let's say you found a directory out there that's fantastic, or even like LinkedIn, and you're like, I want to automate this. I want to just grab all this information. It's going to be great. If that's the case, then it's already been done by another company that's better at it, and you could just buy it as a bulk purchase. So let's talk a little bit about the two that we're going to cover. Now, the first one is outsourcing, and it's pretty much what you think it is. One thing I want to point out, though, when you think outsourcing, most people think, oh, you're going to hire someone in the Philippines or India or some country where the per hour rate is cheaper. And for the most part, that is true, but this also doesn't exclude just regular delegation. If you work at a company, you could have someone below you who's cheaper do this, and you can also hire someone that's in your country as a contractor. It's not necessarily overseas, it just has that reputation. It's also not completely accurate to think of this as leveraging people who are cheaper, because sometimes it's not even that they're cheaper, it's just that they have more time. If you're in sales or you're an entrepreneur or a founder, you don't want to be spending your time doing the tedious stuff. You want to be doing high value things. So making someone do this rote manual work could make sense regardless of the cost. Now within outsourcing, there's really two different ways you can do it. One is like the Henry Ford method, where you hire multiple people and have each one focus on one process. So maybe one person is actually going out and finding targets, and then the next person is using those targets and finding their email, and then even maybe a third person is then taking that information and grabbing some custom information that you can include in your template. The alternative is having one person do step 1, step 2, and step 3. Both of these have pros and cons, but I generally suggest you follow the latter version, especially early on in your cold email campaign. The reason being that having one person do the entire process, while they're more expensive because they have to do more things that are different, it actually is a lot better at the beginning, because at the very beginning, we don't know our process very well. So it's better to have someone go through the entire process versus having someone only focus on one, and then the next one doesn't know what the first one did, and the third one doesn't know what the second or the first did. Early on in outsourcing, we try to debug the process as much as possible, and that's usually a more expensive phase of the process. Then later on, once we know a defined strategy, we know exactly where we're getting our leads, we know exactly who we want, we know exactly the level in the company or whatever it is, then we can go for something that's more efficient, faster, and cheaper. Now, with regards to tools in this course, we're just gonna use freelancer.com. I know there's tons of other websites out there, Upwork, People Per Hour, Guru.com, but freelancer.com I think is perfect for what we're trying to do. Freelancer is great for getting people who do relatively manual work, and they have just a massive community of people who are good at data entry, and there's a lot of people on there who specialize in mining and prospecting. And it's also worth saying that we're going to do a crash course in this section. You guys don't need to be outsourcing masters. If you want to become an outsourcing master, I have a course on this that's 21 hours long. So just for you, we're gonna strip it down to the absolute basics so you can get in, get out, and get somebody to help you. Now, the last thing I'll say is at the very end of the section, we're gonna talk about buying brokered lists, like buying bulk lists. I'll admit it, it's not my favorite way of doing this, but some people can make it work. Therefore, it's worth at least knowing how to do it. All right, with that being said, next lecture, we're going to jump into the basics of outsourcing. I'm going to introduce a couple concepts to you so you can kind of frame the way you think about it before you actually hire someone. All right, see you then.